Hello, Miami Dolphins fans. How are you today? And thank you for watching the Sleeper Miami Dolphins YouTube channel. I am your host, Mike Oliva, with a show for you today. As always, please be sure to subscribe to the channel, smash that like button, and put comments down below. If you have a comment or a topic you want me to talk about on an upcoming show, please leave them below, and I will address it on a future show. Also, if you're on social media, on Twitter or X, please be sure to follow us at Sleeper Miami. Okay, there was a little bit of a news bit here on Thursday that was very interesting, where the Miami Dolphins were mentioned by Adam Schefter. Adam Schefter was on the Pat McAfee show, and they were talking about Stephon Diggs, who recently signed with the Washington Commanders. Adam Schefter said, was there any other interest out there in Diggs? And he said, yes, there were, or yes, there was, in that the Miami Dolphins, the Kansas City Chiefs, and the Las Vegas Raiders also had interest in Stephon Diggs. Obviously, they didn't sign him Miami, but why this is interesting is because you look at this offseason, what Miami's done. Yeah, they've run off the high-priced players like Hill and Waddle and Tua and Chubb and all those guys who are making a ton of money, amongst some others. And they really, the only player they spent money on was Malik Willis. One, it's a quarterback, and they needed a quarterback. And two, when you compare what he got paid to what other quarterbacks got paid, yeah, it's a lot, but it's really nothing, outrageous. Everyone else they signed for the most part as a free agent was a one-year vet, usually like an older guy, or sometimes it was just like a younger guy. And those guys got one-year deals with no guaranteed money, really. So going after someone like Stephon Diggs, or having interest, I should say, in someone like Stephon Diggs really, veered away from what they've done the rest of this offseason. That's why that was kind of interesting, because I don't think any fans of the Dolphins or anyone in the Miami Dolphins media would have assumed Miami would show interest in Diggs. One, a lot of off-the-field problems, and the Miami Dolphins have sort of shied away from guys with off-the-field issues, and they've run off a bunch of guys who had off-the-field issues, so there's that aspect of it. And to sign Stephon Diggs would have cost a little more. I don't have the exact numbers yet of what he signed for in Washington, but I'm sure it's an incentive-laden contract with some of the incentives very easy to meet. And I'm sure it's for a little bit more than a vet minimum as well, if not for a lot more than a vet minimum, honestly. But it kind of raises the red flag that this Miami Dolphins front office, this Miami Dolphins coaching staff knows they might have an issue at wide receiver, and they're looking to address it. And well, some of the reports so far out of training camp have been promising about the young wide receivers like a Caleb Douglas, who they took on night 2 of the draft in round 3 out of Texas Tech. The position group overall is still not very good. Jalen Tolbert's probably your number 1, and he's really not a number 1 in the NFL. He's probably a number 3 on most teams, and maybe a number 4 on some other teams. Tutu Atwell, so far this camp, and again, it's just 1 week old, so you take it with a grain of salt, has dropped a lot of passes from what I've been told. Malik Washington's been pretty good, so I guess that's kind of promising there too. Chris Bell is injured. He's probably not going to start the season on the active roster, and who knows how many games he'll play this year. Kevin Coleman Jr. has been okay, a little spotty up and down here and there. Other than that, when you get to the Taj Washington types and such, really nothing to talk about. So the Dolphins having interest in Stephon Diggs, it might, read between the lines here. They know they have an issue at wide receiver. So they didn't get Diggs, but there's other free agent wide receivers out there on the open market. And 2 of them look, it's not an impressive list of who's out there still, but 2 of them kind of jump off the page where if Miami's interested in Diggs, maybe they're interested in one of these 2 names. The first one is Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen, not the youngest guy in the world. He's just turned 34 not too long ago, but he did have 81 receptions last season for 777 yards, and he showed he still has gas in the tank. Obviously, in Miami, he would walk in the door today and be their number 1 wide receiver. Now, is he a true number 1 wide receiver? No, he's not. But in Miami, he would be. And I think you could probably get him at that age pretty cheap. Now, maybe not vet minimum. It might be more, once again, of an incentive-laden contract here, with most of the incentives kind of easy to be met, or a little bit more than a vet minimum, but nothing crazy or outrageous, because he is 34 years old and he has missed time with injuries and such. But again, beggars can't be choosers. And when you're the Dolphins, you're not looking for a guy to come in and be a progress stopper at the position. but you need something competent at the wide receiver position. And not just because you're trying to win games this year, but because you got to know what you got in Malik Willis at quarterback. Because even if the Dolphins end up with like a top 5 pick next year or a top 3 pick next year, and they want to take a quarterback, well, you got to know what you got with your quarterback now. And yes, there is a scenario, it's slim, where, they don't win a lot of games, but Willis plays well enough to be like, you know what, that's my guy moving forward. So, yeah, if we're picking third, I don't need to take a quarterback type of deal. So if you want to find out about your quarterback in Willis, you got to give him maybe another weapon to throw to. Keenan Allen might be that type of weapon that won't break the bank. It's not going to, it's a 1-year deal. He'll probably only play like 9 or 10 games or so because he does get hurt a lot. He's not really going to stop the progress of the young guys like Bell or Caleb Douglas or Kevin Coleman Jr. He just won't because he's not that type. But it would just be a competent wide receiver to add to the team. The other name to keep an eye on is Curtis Samuel. Now, Samuel, not as good as Keenan Allen. I believe last year he only played in like 6 games. I think he had like 7 receptions for 81 yards, and that all came in 1 game. Then he was hurt. Yeah, you could probably get Samuel for the vet minimum, honestly. I mean, that ain't going to cost much more. You can get him for the vet minimum. So is he better than some of the guys they got? Is he better than Jalen Reagor that they already signed? I don't know. They probably have to work him out and see. But I think Allen's probably the name to keep an eye on here. Because if you're interested in Diggs, that probably means you've at least considered or thought about Keenan Allen. Will Allen want to go to a rebuilding team? Probably not. But if you pay him a little bit more, and I do mean a little bit more, not much more, then he'll get anywhere else. Then, money talks. This might be his last contract in the NFL too. You don't know how many more years he's got left. So he might just look to cash in here and be like, you know what? It's only like 800,000 more, but 800,000 is still 800,000 at the end of the day. So we'll see. We'll see. But I do think the Miami Dolphins, to me, it just shows they know they have some sort of an issue at wide receiver, and they got to bring in maybe somebody. And again, even if they don't sign one of these guys, once those final roster cuts are made, I expect them to be on that waiver wire looking at because even though they're weak at wide receiver, I don't know which teams. I'd have to look at some of the rosters, but there's going to be at least a couple teams that are probably loaded at wide receiver right now, and they're going to have to make a tough call and cut someone, and maybe someone they cut can, one team's trash is another team's treasure, as they say, and maybe we can get a quality wide receiver off the waiver wire. Obviously, look at what the Packers do. These guys came from the Packers. They know those Packers players as well as anybody. First team you're going to look at is pretty much anyone the Packers cut. They're going to be all over it because they know those guys. They know those guys, their work ethic. They know how good or how not good they are, and they're going to be all over those Packers cuts. So that's the first team you look at. But other than that, they're going to look at every team and see what they do, see if they can upgrade the wide receiver position. And I would think that also goes for edge rusher, safety, and corner. Corner, not so much maybe because, look, I don't know what the status is of Storm Duck or Darrell Baker Jr. I know Jeff Hafley said they'll be back sometime this year. Well, it's kind of vague. Sometime this year is like week 3 or is it like week 13? It's just vague. And I don't know. So we'll see. We'll see there. But I think wide receiver is in play here for the Dolphins to make a move. There's something to keep an eye on right here. And here's something else too. Miami has a joint practice next week with Washington. So they're going to face Stephon Diggs, number one. In that joint practice and even the preseason game, if the wide receivers really struggle, especially the joint practice, they really struggle, that's when, in case of emergency, break glass. And I think that's where they would break the glass, pick up the bat phone and start, looking at who's out there, maybe like a Keenan Allen. So I think next week's going to be that's a big week because you got your first preseason game, but more so than a preseason game, it's what happens in that joint practice with Washington. Do their corners just make our wide receivers look dumb and just like shut them down for a whole practice? Or do some of these wide receivers step up, make some plays, take that brass ring of opportunity and be like, hey, maybe we got something here with a couple of these guys where they don't have to go out there and consider Curtis Samuel, Keenan Allen, or whoever is still on the open market. And also don't forget, Miami also had interest in Juan Jennings back in like May and June. They didn't sign him. He got a payday. I think from the Vikings it was. He got a payday. But yes, they have been kicking the tires on wide receivers. So again, where there's smoke, there's fire. We got to talk about the big Dolphin shakeup in the front office this week. I know we've sort of spoken about this a lot at dolphinstalk.com, but here on Sleeper, there's still so much more to unpack with this because this really is a big moment in the history of the Miami Dolphins organization. Anytime you have an owner kind of stepping down in some ways, yeah, he's still technically the owner, but he's like, I'm the owner, but I'm not running stuff anymore. And sort of having putting someone else in charge of football operations, and Stephen Ross's son-in-law, Daniel Sillman. Tom Garfinkel, who's been here for 13 years and was Stephen Ross's right-hand man. If this was a mob movie, or if this was The Sopranos, Stephen Ross is Tony Soprano, and Tom Garfinkel is like Silvio or Paulie Walnuts. He's the right-hand man. He was always there. He wasn't going anywhere. So this is kind of a big news thing. Not so much of like wins and losses on the field this year, but kind of the vision going forward, how, most fans have sort of understood how this organization is run under Ross. Yeah, that's going to change now. You go from an 86-year-old man running things to a 37-year-old man running things. That's going to change. 86, you might be more patient. You might be slower to change. You might want to just sort of ride things out, status quo, so to speak. When you're 37, you might be more instinctive. You might be more knee-jerk. You might be more like, I ain't waiting around for these results. I've given you 3 or 4 years. It's time for a change. Like that type of stuff. And, clearly he brought it. And now it's been, a lot of people have known this. I've known this. And now it's more public. So now it's easy to talk about. Sillman was the one who brought in Troy Aikman. So that was his call. Sillman was the one who ran the interviews for the GM, who ran the interviews for the head coach back in January. Sillman was the point man on all that. Yeah, Ross was there, but he really didn't have a say. Sillman has been calling the shots. He's bringing in his guys, and that's where Troy Aikman comes in. And I'm going to talk about him more in a second. But, yeah, I think change is coming. Again, you're not going to see it on the field so much right now, but change is coming. First thing, to circle back to that show I did here on Sleeper probably 2 weeks ago or so now, about that report that the Miami Dolphins are probably changing their uniforms next year because the whole deal with Fanatics are coming out with new uniforms for 30 of the 32 teams of a higher quality, higher made ones. They're not making them for the Saints or Dolphins. Why? Because the Saints and Dolphins have put in for uniform request changes in 2027. Now with this whole shakeup, Sillman in charge, Tom Garfinkel gone. Yeah, that. It's still a report and a rumor, but I'm like 99% sure it's happening. Now, happening for the uniform for sure. Logo, they might keep the same logo at the end of the day. But I think there's a good chance they're going to tweak that logo in some way too. Will they go back to a throwback? Maybe. Or will they even update it again? Or will they combine the new logo with a throwback and come up with some mishmash? I don't know. But the uniform change is happening. And again, it might be a minor uniform change. It might be they're just going to add something to the sleeve or something to the collar. Or it could be just like a whole new color and they're going to like get rid of white uniforms and have gray uniform. Who knows? It could, whatever it is, I don't know. But there's going to be some form of uniform change happening. The logo one, we can't say for sure, but I would tend to guess something happened because this is all coming from Sillman now. And Tom Garfinkel. So Ross wanted the new logo in like 2013 because, he's like, this is my team. This is my era. I want to put my stamp on the organization. Get rid of the old logos. Get this new one. Well, yeah, he's still the owner, but he's not in charge. I wonder if Sillman wants to put his stamp on this era of Miami Dolphins football. We'll see. Because Tom Garfinkel was the one who would sort of run with that, and he would follow the orders of Ross. With Tom not in that role anymore, there's probably no one there to block this type of stuff like there has been in the past. Speaking of Tom Garfinkel, we have to talk about this one. Tom Garfinkel isn't gone, okay? He stepped down as team president and CEO. He is still the vice chairman of Hard Rock Stadium and the Miami Dolphins, meaning he ain't running the show, but he ain't going nowhere. He's still going to be sitting in the owner's box on Sunday, okay? Let's just get that perfectly clear. He ain't going nowhere. He's just in a little bit of a lesser role. And trust me, Tom Garfinkel has made the Miami Dolphins more money in his 13 years than they can probably count when it comes to F1, the tennis, and it comes to national championship games in college football, being in the rotation there for the college football stuff, when it comes to everything they've done with concerts and stuff, when it comes to the renovation of Hard Rock Stadium, Tom Garfinkel, he's an asset. You just don't want to throw him to the curb. I know fans like to blame him for stuff on the field. He really was. I mean, he had a voice, but he wasn't making the calls. That was all Chris Greer, Mike McDaniel, Flores. Those guys are running the football side. He might have had team president and CEO title, but he wasn't making football decisions at the end of the day. So you can't, I know it's easy for fans to blame him for losing. It's not really his fault. He was there for the money. And, this is the question now. Who is Daniel Sillman going to replace Tom Garfinkel with? You should have a team president. You should have a CEO. And I'm sure they're going to ask Tom to sit in on the interviews whenever they do get around to, hiring people to replace them. And whoever they hire, let's be honest, they're going to follow the blueprint that Tom has run for 13 years because it's been successful. They've made money. What's the valuation of the team now? It's like over $12 billion. What Ross just sold, like 8 weeks ago, like 1% for like some insane amount of money of the Dolphins to the guy who started like Microsoft. It was some crazy amount of money. And that's all because of Tom Garfinkel. So Tom, whoever they hire, they're going to lean on Tom. Tom's going to be in on the interviews. I'm not saying he's going to handpick his replacement. That'll come down to Sillman. But he's going to have a voice in who they hire. And I'm sure that guy's going to run the same playbook that Tom has run. And why wouldn't you? It's been financially successful. Here's my question, though. Team president and CEO are kind of two different titles. Team president's more like the football side. Once again, John Eric Sullivan's running the show there with Hafley, but you're still involved on the football side. CEO is more about the money side of everything involved. I'm wondering if they split those two positions up. Instead of having one guy do both, you hire a team president and you hire a CEO because they kind of are two different roles. And if they split those positions up and you need a team president, keep an eye. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm just saying keep an eye on Troy Aikman. His contract with ESPN expires at the end of this 2026 season. ESPN's got the Super Bowl this year. After that Super Bowl, Troy Aikman is no longer an employee of ESPN. They could re-sign him, of course. But his contract's up after this year, making him a free agent. If Troy, and again, ESPN pays so much stinking money, and it's an easy job. You're working one day a week. You're flying on like a Thursday. You're out, Tuesday morning, or you're flying on a Friday, actually, because it's a Monday night game. You're staying at 5-star hotels you don't pay for. You're flying on private jets you don't pay for. You have more money than God in the bank from your time as a player and from your time at Fox and now ESPN. It ain't about the money, okay? If he's just bored, doesn't want to do it anymore, and, Troy has said he wanted to be, involved with a team at some point in his career. He's thought about it in the past when he took on this advisor role for the Dolphins. Jeff Darlington recently said in an interview on a podcast that, he came in, over-prepared for this general manager search and this head coach search. He really put in the time. He really took it seriously. He was really into it, involved. I'm not saying they would do that. First off, I don't think you make him the CEO because I don't think that's Troy's strength. But team president, where, you got Sillman, you got Troy, you got Sullivan, Shore, and Hafley, sort of like that, that makes a lot of sense. And again, he might not want that job. He might just want to stay on as a consultant and an advisor. I don't know. I don't know Troy Aikman. I don't know what's in his head. I don't know what's in his heart. But he is like 60-something now, I think. How old's Troy? Hold on. Let me do a quick search. Troy is 59. He's going to turn 60 in November. Maybe he is just done calling games, and maybe he wants a new challenge. And look, being a team president, maybe it doesn't pay as well as ESPN, but it's not like he's going to go hungry. He'll make a healthy amount there, especially if the team actually wins at some point. So just something to keep an eye on. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying I have inside info. I'm just saying I wouldn't be shocked because this is Sillman's ship now. He's running this ship. He's steering the ship. So he wants to bring in his guy. Well, the first guy he brought in was Troy Aikman as a consultant. So, again, if they split up team president and CEO, hire two people instead of having one guy do both, keep an eye on Troy Aikman. Last thing I want to talk about is this. I think the biggest change that needs to happen, and I don't know if it will happen, with Ross no longer running things and Sillman running things, is Daniel Sillman cannot be an absentee owner. Stephen Ross, since he's owned the Dolphins, has lived half the time in Manhattan, in New York, half the time in South Florida, and he's been very hands off with the Dolphins. And in some ways, that's good. You don't want your owner to be like telling you who to draft or like, looking at your salary cap, telling you who to cut or telling you what to do. You don't want your owner doing that, but you need your owner there. It's like a substitute teacher. When you got the substitute teacher, all the kids are going to mess around. When the owner's not in the building, it's just not good. And I was on the Fish Tank Live podcast at DolphinsTalk.com Wednesday night with Chris Perkins of the Sun Sentinel, OJ McDuffie. Everyone knows OJ. And I brought this up, and they sort of pushed back on me saying, it's not a big deal. It's not a big deal. I think it's a big deal. And I know someone else does as well, which is Mike Florio of Pro Football Talk, because we've spoken about that when I've had him on my own personal podcast. And you need the owner to be present. Okay. He doesn't need to be so hands-on, but he needs to be there. And he needs to spend more time in South Florida than he does in New York. Now, I don't know what Sillman's going to do, because he has worked for Ross for years in the real estate side of things. And, I'm sure he's got other ventures in New York and Manhattan that he probably wants to tend to. But I also know this isn't just him running the Dolphins and running off football operations. He is now running I forget the exact title, Ross's sports portfolio, because Ross is tied in with other sports ventures, not as big as the Dolphins, obviously, but he's tied in with other sports ventures like F1 and the Miami Open. A lot of that's based in Miami. So I'm hoping Daniel Sillman's just going to live in Miami and work out of Miami. And, yes, he didn't have to fly up to Manhattan every now and then, but spend the majority of his time in Manhattan. And because I think for an NFL team to be successful, the owner's got to be somewhat present and hands-on. Again, doesn't mean making picks, doesn't mean questioning who got cut or who's on the roster, who's at. I'm not saying that. You just got to be around the building, so you just can't be lied to just because you're not there. And I think that was the problem with Ross in Miami and why he stuck with guys like Jeff Ireland for so long, why he stuck with guys like Mike Tannenbaum for so long, why he stuck with guys like Chris Greer for far too long. Because when you're not there, you don't know what's going on. So when you do show up 5 days a month and you go, how's it going, guys? And the team's losing, Chris Greer is going to say, boss, we're not winning, but it ain't my fault. Ain't my fault. This guy's not doing his job. This guy's no good. I didn't want this guy, but Mike wanted me to pick him. And you can point the finger at everybody. You can point the finger at Flores. You can point the finger at Philbin. You can point the finger at this one. You can say, not my fault. And Ross ain't there. He goes, I trust Chris. Chris is my guy. He's saying it's not his fault. It's not his fault. Well, maybe if Ross was there every day or close to every day, he would say, Jesus, Chris, you're the one making these decisions. Why are you telling me you didn't have a voice in it? You're making these decisions. It's not working out. Being present matters. Look at the teams that win in the NFL. The Patriots. Yeah, Tom Brady, Bill Belichick. Robert Kraft is there every day. Guess who they didn't have last year? Bill Belichick or Tom Brady. They still went to the Super Bowl because the owner is present at least, and he knows what's going on. He knew why he fired the one head coach after 1 year and raced after Mike Vrabel because he's there every day, and he saw that head coach. I hired him. I made a mistake. I'm going to fix my mistake, get rid of him, and I'm going to hire Mike Vrabel, who I know is successful. Then you're in a Super Bowl. And even Jerry Jones, yeah, he might be too hands-on. The Cowboys win the division every now and then. The Cowboys win playoff games every couple of years. Maybe they're not going to the Super Bowl. They're having success because the owner is present. Okay. Obviously, you want more success than they've had, but we won a playoff game in 25 years. If we could win a division and win a playoff game, I'd start there. That's the point. The owner being present matters. Okay. It's not that he's got to be meddling. He's just got to be there with his ear to the ground to know who's really, if things go sideways, who's really messing up. Or if things aren't going sideways, wow, this guy, he made this call, that call, that call. It worked out. And that's a good thing. You just have, when you're not there, you don't know. That's the thing. That's how you end up with Chris Greer having job security for over 20 plus years and being a general manager for far too long than he should have been. Obviously not all 20, because Greer was the problem, but Ross wasn't around to realize Greer was the problem. Having the owner around the building matters. Okay. Everyone laughs what happened in Indianapolis with Jim Irsay when he died, and his daughter took over and she was on the sideline just listening in on the headsets. She was just asking questions. I think it's awesome. Not that, once again, she's not saying, we got to do this, we got to do that. She just wants to know. She wants to be present. She wants to, oh, who called that play? Was it the head coach? Was it the OC? That play, it didn't work. Okay, now I know who's screwing up. And if, you hear 10 plays don't work, well, who's calling? You got to be present to know what's going on in your team. It's $1 billion company. You should be present. And I think that's the point. I might not have made it great last night with Chris and OJ, but that's the point I was trying to make. And I hope I did articulate it here a little bit better. Having an owner in the building matters. It matters. And that's hopefully is something here that someone will do that is different than what Stephen Ross did. We'll see. But I think if you're a Dolphins fan, these changes are welcome. Again, I don't blame Tom Garfinkel for losing. That wasn't his role. But sometimes just a new person in a new role can hurt. Change for the sake of change isn't always bad. So there's that. And I think with Ross, this is a very welcome change. Nothing against Ross. People say he spent the money. Folks, all owners spend the money. Okay. They all spend the money. You rarely see an NFL team go, well, we want this guy, but we can't afford him. No, that doesn't happen in the NFL. It happens in Major League Baseball all the time. It doesn't happen in the NFL. Any team wants anyone. They can afford them because the money, you can print money if you own an NFL team. None of them are broke. They got more money than they know what to do with just from the TV deal alone. Then you go into merchandising and all that. I mean, the NFL, those owners, the money that comes in just from TV, merchandising, it pays for the team and then some. You don't have to worry about money. They can all afford. So when people say, Ross, he was great. He signed the checks. They all signed the checks in the NFL. They all signed the checks. But it just didn't work. He stuck with the wrong people for too long. He hired the wrong people. He listened to the wrong people. Either way, it's a welcome change. Like I've been saying on social media, it can't get worse. It really can't. Worst thing that can happen is nothing changes and we're still stuck where we are now. It literally can't get worse. We go 25 years without a playoff win. So we'll see how it goes. I think it's welcome news. And we'll keep an eye here on that free agent market at wide receiver because they might be up to something there. We'll see. As always, thank you for listening. Please be sure to follow on Twitter, X at Sleeper Miami, right here on YouTube. Subscribe to the channel, smash that like button. And again, leave us a comment below if you got a topic or something you want me to talk about on an upcoming show. Everyone have a great rest of your Thursday, and we'll talk to you again after a while.